Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
Thanks for that, Vic Nation. Also, a cricket update coming up later on in terms of that T20 World Cup. Well, talking about World Cups, I would think a name that in many ways is synonymous with any World Cup of sorts when advice is sought is Tim Noakes. So he's the man in the spotlight for the next 45 minutes. Great if you ask him, well, what is one thing you know about him and what, in fact, do you want to know about him? So you can do that by calling in 0891 104207, 0891 104207. You can also tweet me, Ashraf Garda 1. You can also email me. I'll read the emails off the air, not on the air, of course. And you can SMS to 34701. So that's it for the next 45 minutes. Tim Noakes is the man in the spotlight. Good of you to come in. Thanks, Tim. Hi.
Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you for having me.
Interesting one. I mean, the one thing you've been described today as the Malema of what? Of medicine or sports science or what?
Medicine, actually. I've sort of jumped out of sport into medicine.
Okay, so the comparison is less the medicine, more the Malema. Why, sir?
Well, I don't know. I think people think I'm a populist and I just get on bandwagons and then drive them as hard as I can. And so for the last 2 years, I've been really interested in nutrition. Before, like all medical doctors 2 years ago, I knew absolutely nothing about nutrition.
So is this a case more of you're the Malema of medicine because what you say, when you talk, people listen? Is that the more appropriate?
Well, I certainly hope so. And I have a lot of time for Mr. Malema, and he has 20 million followers, and people take him seriously.
Maybe you can speak on the same platform. There's another debate completely. How do you feel about it? I mean, the fact that the truth is you are quoted. And there are many, sports scientists around in the country, and some of them I'm less familiar with. And only because it's true when we say sports science, we think firstly of Tim Noakes. I mean, it's an incredible reputation you've built up over the years, isn't it?
Well, thanks very much, because a lot of people think I've kind of ruined it recently.
Well, we'll come to the ruining just now. Yeah.
Yes, you know what? When I started, I realized that I was starting a new discipline, and I had to have the public on my side. And I actively sought that. And I tried to advertise and promote science. So I wrote my book, Law of Running. That was the very first book.
And law is spelled Lore, right? So,
correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Okay.
And I wrote that in 1985, and it was specifically to tell people, actually, this is what we know about running and the science of running. There is a lot of information, and it's all hard science. And so I've tried to continue in that way to show the public that there is a science behind what I do.
Okay, so we'll talk about the nuts and bolts there in a second. But what you're saying is effectively you very actively marketed yourself. You had to get the book out, which gave you the credibility, whether you're right or wrong, and then you'd get more interviews and the media would follow you, and of course your brand grows, which then allows you to talk the language that you talk about anyway.
Yeah, but understand in those days we knew nothing about branding. I mean, and I must admit, I'm certain that the Sports Science Institute certainly came about because I was able to give the Rupert family some body of knowledge, and they'd say, gee, actually there is something in the sports science, so let's take it seriously. So yes, it's been very helpful.
So what's your official title besides being the Malema of medicine?
Well, I'm the Discovery Health Professor of Exercise and Sports Science at the University of Cape Town.
So that's the title.
Yeah, and then I've already added the sponsor's name, so that without that sponsor Discovery, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah. Let's talk about some people say I've ruined it.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, what happened was I have been following the diet that we're told to eat for 33 years. I'm an early adapter. I was the first person in South Africa, or one of them, to start eating the so-called prudent healthy diet. And 33 years later, I discovered that all it did, it made me fat, lazy, and pushed me towards diabetes.
So wait, what were you told to eat? I mean, in terms of your understanding?
Oh, you must eat no fat. That's the key.
Okay,
is you must reduce fat as much as you can, and you replace it with healthy carbohydrates, which I did. But unfortunately, if you're pre-diabetic like I am, or if your father has diabetes as my father had diabetes, followed the prudent diet and died in the most shocking circumstances. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I should have thought about this a long time ago, but I didn't, because everyone told me, well, you're eating the proper diet and you're active and you're relatively lean. How can you possibly get diabetes? And that was my view. And it was totally wrong. And I didn't.
How did you discover that you were wrong?
Well, I changed my diet, and then suddenly everything got better, and started checking on my blood values and saw that I had prediabetes, which means that I had a high glucose in my blood and a high called HbA1c, which is another measure of how high your glucose has been over a period. And I had other markers, and so that was clearly the diagnosis. And fortunately, I managed to reverse most of them, but not all. They're not perfect. And had I started 10 years before, I would be much healthier than I am.
But did you then discover it on your own, or someone told you about it?
I then started reading, you see, and suddenly I realized, my goodness, there's a whole body of evidence that this prudent diet is very good for some people, but for a majority, in my view, it's not so good. And that if you can't metabolize carbohydrate, you get into trouble. So I really was very quiet for at least a year. I'd said nothing, and all that time I was reading. I've probably read 70 books now, and at least 2,000 articles, scientific articles, and the evidence to me is absolutely abundantly clear that there are two types of human beings. There are those who can metabolize carbohydrate, and that's fine. They must do exactly what they're told. But there's another population who can't, and if they continue to eat carbohydrate, all that happens is that they get fat, and eventually they get diabetes, as I was developing.
Okay, we're going to take your calls, 0891 104207, with Tim Noakes, sports scientist supreme, I would say. We think anyway. But if you know him and you want to say hi, if you sort of worked with him at any level, great. If you're related, family, fine. If you're one of these skeptics, or one of his critics rather, that's also fine. But what's the many things you know about Tim Noakes? Maybe share those anecdotes, or one thing you want to ask some questions about him. You always wanted to ask anyway, but you certainly can do so. So 0891 104207, 0891 104207. We'll get to your calls in just a second. Let's then talk about some of the other issues, Tim, in terms of what's occupying your time now.
Well, at the moment, I'm kind of finishing up my career, and in doing that, I'm trying to finish up all the stuff that I haven't done. And I've been promoting this idea that the brain regulates exercise performance, so there's a book waiting for that. But I'm really, at the moment, writing a book on this whole debate about what should you be eating, and putting all the scientific evidence.
Because now, up to now, you haven't written the book, but you've actually said we should throw out the entire chapter, just in the law of running.
Yeah, that's correct. And I will be revising Law of Running again. And the problem is, it's an epic book, and to fool around with it is a problem. I don't know quite what to do.
So the response you've had has been what? Because basically what you're saying, I'm just thinking of the whole HIV/AIDS stories, like you're saying, beetroot and whatever is the way to go, and you're suddenly saying, actually, I've been wrong. So maybe I'm simplifying, but I mean, what has happened to people who follow sports science, medicine? How do they respond to you?
Every day I receive a letter saying, "Thank you, Dr. Noakes, for saving my life." 2 days ago, I received a letter from a doctor in Clanwilliam, in Caledon, and he said to me, "Dr. Noakes, 4 months ago I weighed 120 kilograms. I now have been on your diet for 4 months. I weigh 100 kilograms. I lost 20 kilograms. Before going on your diet, Dr. Noakes, I had sleep apnea, I had diabetes, I had obesity, I had high blood pressure, I had high blood cholesterol, and I had atrial fibrillation, which is a serious condition in the heart where the heart doesn't function normally." He said 4 months later, I'm off all medication, everything. He says it's completely revolutionized my medicine and the way I'm going to treat people in the future.
So what's his diet like now? How has it changed?
He eats a high-fat diet now with low carbohydrate. So if you're not tolerant, you've got to cut the carbohydrate to less than about 50 grams a day, and that cures you. So for those people like myself, we get sick because we can't metabolize carbohydrate properly. And every time we eat carbohydrate, we just turn it into fat. And then it develops as what we call a metabolic syndrome, and that's highly toxic because it produces diabetes and heart disease.
Indeed. Okay, I'm going to ask Tim Noakes in a moment the one question, what is the one thing about him that we clearly misunderstand as a human being? We'll do that right after this. Did you know that the Loeries Awards were established in 1978 by the SABC as a mechanism to promote the new medium of the time, television, to a vision that rests on the premise that excellence will fuel an economic revolution in South Africa. Since then, the awards have grown to encompass all areas of brand communication. So join me, Ashraf Garda, this Sunday, the 23rd of September from 9 to 11 a.m. on Media at SAFM, broadcasting live from the Cullinan Hotel in Cape Town for Loeries Awards 2012. We will bring you the latest news and reviews from the weekend as they unfold, as well as some of the winners from the Saturday evening and a throw forward for the Sunday evening. So, wherever you are, you will be at the Loeries if you tune in to Media at SAFM. SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. And there's more. SAFM, together with the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, invites you to the second annual Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Liberation Walk, which happens on Saturday, the 6th of October. You can enter the 5, the 10 or the 21 kilometer walk as we honor the lives of our struggle heroes. Now, There's also entertainment for kids and the family, and all proceeds will in fact go to the Ludeke Primary School to provide learning facilities. A very good, important cause there. You need to know more. Just check out the website, tamboliberationwalk.co.za. Join us as we walk to educate. SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader.
Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
All right, in the spotlight is Tim Noakes, the sports scientist. So, reaction then? Let's just get that out of the way. I mean,
I would say that
some of. I mean, you gave the example of the man who's very grateful. But what about people in your field?
Oh, I think there's a lot of skepticism and unhappiness. So I would guess that probably 90% of what I read is positive, the messages I get, and 10% is not positive. I guess outside there's much more resistance.
And talking about the type of resistance you're getting from people in your field, what are they saying?
Well, people who have been trained in a particular way, it's very difficult to say, actually, maybe there's another way. But the point about science is that I always say, 50% of what I say is wrong, but I don't know which 50% it is. And that's the key. You've got to understand that there is no certainty. For example, I was at medical school. The doctor my age won the Nobel Prize 7 years ago for discovering that bacteria cause gastric ulcers. Now, I was taught at medical school in 1970 that ulcers are caused by stress, and you operate and you cut the nerves, and that reduces the stress on the stomach, and you do all these sorts of things. And that's what we were taught. Now, no one won the Nobel Prize at UCT because no one questioned that was wrong or right. Whereas this guy, sitting there in Melbourne, fortunately, he has someone who says, actually, I don't think that's true. And 20 years later, he has a Nobel Prize. So if we believe that what we believe today is absolutely correct, that's not true. We have to teach our students.
So it's possible even your new revelation may be wrong as well.
Well, absolutely. But I looked at the evidence and understand. I reviewed the evidence for 2 years, and I didn't come out and say anything until I was absolutely certain about the evidence.
Well, somebody's saying, where can we get this diet? So I'm not sure whether you can assist.
Well, it's not the Tim Noakes diet. It's the paleo diet or the low carbohydrate diet, or in Sweden it's called the low carbohydrate, high fat diet. So people just need to Google low carbohydrate or paleo diets, and there is a wealth of information. And what will surprise them is how much good science there is. There are some really good scientists globally addressing this question, and the information is remarkable. But it's hidden. And it's hidden
why is it hidden?
It's because it's commercially sensitive.
So people will lose money.
Yeah, well, we're telling people they shouldn't take sugar-containing products, and you just look at the sugar-containing products; they're the major source of foods.
Is big business coming after you?
Well, they will. Ultimately, they have to. But there's that, and then there's the whole cholesterol and heart disease issues. And it's because we're telling people to eat a high-fat diet, so the cholesterol people say, "But how can you do that? Because it can cause your cholesterol to rise." And then that's a whole other story.
How did you feel when you? Now I want to move on to other issues, but let's just get this out of the way. How do you feel when you realized that you were wrong? Fine, you were following other people's advice, but that you were now definitely wrong, and this is the way to go. And you also made the point of publicly talking about it, and then also telling people like myself to say, tear the whole chapter out from the law of running. How did you feel about it personally?
I was invigorated. I felt released.
Not embarrassed.
Not at all, because I'm a scientist, and the science, you must move on. We're always trying to disprove science. We're not trying to prove things. We're trying to disprove ourselves and disprove our knowledge. And it's the thing that you hold most dear, which is often the most wrong and most difficult to release. So my whole career, and that's the book I wrote, Challenging Beliefs, is about the things that I've disproven in my career. And I believed them all at one stage, and now I don't disbelieve them. So it's very invigorating to move on.
But were you concerned about the backlash? Or is that like, it doesn't bother scientists?
I think you just have to accept that this is going to be a backlash. And let me tell you and tell the public that I am the most critical person of myself. No one is more critical of me than I am of myself, and my wife, of course. And I do not stay stuff until I've thought it through for months and months and months and researched it. I mean, my house, you can't get into my house anymore. There's so many books, there's so many articles, and that excludes my work. I've got another huge office which is full of information.
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
And so I outread everyone in South Africa. I read more than anyone. Yeah.
Okay.
In medicine.
What's the one thing about you that we don't know? It's not only at all, but you'd have to share with us. Anyway.
I'm incredibly shy, incredibly introverted, and incredibly sensitive, which is the exact opposite to the public
introvert
persona.
who talks. So how do you even get over that? I mean, because I've certainly heard you delivering talks and things. How do you manage the introvert being effectively very much a public spokesperson.
Yeah, it's because I'm talking about science and I can understand it and I've practiced it and I believe in it and I think the message is important. So that's why I'm invigorated by it. The focus is not on me. Actually, I gave a TEDx talk recently where I was right in the middle and I felt quite intimidated and it took me time to get over it. So there are environments in which I do feel intimidated and insecure. And I don't like the view on me. I like the people to be looking at the projectors and the slides, not on me. And I think that kind of summarizes it. I want the facts. Look at the facts. Don't look at me.
All right. Tim Noakes with me in the spotlight. Anytime you want to join the conversation, great. 0891 104 207. Mfundo is saying, so what can be done to improve our overall performance in the Olympics and other world competitions?
We have to improve our coaches. That's the key. Coaching is critical to everything. We have to put in programs that will allow coaches to be better trained and more professional. That is the key. So every country that does well puts more money into sport, but it really goes into coaching and support for the athletes. And that was proven at this Olympic Games. The Australian coaches who left Australia and went to England and Qatar and so on, the athletes, they produced world-class and gold medalists again because they produced them in Australia. They just went somewhere else and reproduced them. So the gold medals follow the coaches, not the athletes.
So the coach is absolutely key.
The coach is critical in everything.
So it goes back to something I often said. The key decision you make in any organization would be appoint the right leader and everything else follows. And sports is another example.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you've pronounced often on, I think, rugby in particular, because it's such a physical, battering sport. And if I can remember, it's almost been standard for you during a World Cup here to say, the less rugby you play, the better chances you have to win a game. And I understand about playing all the time can be crazy, but you always, I think, if I'm not mistaken, encouraged Jake White to not get his World Cup players in their Tri-Nations, and they finish sort of bottom of the log at that time, right? Talk to me more about that. I mean, is that true? I mean,
no, absolutely.
It
took me 4 years to get Jake on board. It took 2 years because the very first day he was appointed. The first month he appointed, came to my office and said, "What do we need to do?" I said, "Jake, we've got to identify the 22 players you want on the field at the final day at the World Cup final." He said, and he wrote a list. And there were 15 of the guys of the 22 who played. It may not have been 15, but it was pretty close. And I said, okay, let us manage those players for the next 4 years, and we will get them onto the field in perfect condition. And we did, because we'd managed them over 4 years. And he finally got the message of how to manage them. I remember in 2006, we had a dreadful, 2006, we had a dreadful season. This is the year before the final. And Jake would come down and say, CJ van der Linde is injured today. And I'd say, unbelievable. We're going to win the World Cup if this keeps happening.
You were delighted.
I was delighted.
Terrible, man. That means they're not playing rugby for a year or something.
In fact, we were both delighted because we knew that the fewer games they played in 2006, the better they would be in 2007.
But that goes against, not your belief, but it obviously goes against what supporters want. Because they want their best players. I mean, I pay to see my best players. Sure. It also goes against the grain of the establishment, not so much the coach, who clearly wants to also produce. They want to be standing at the podium, sort of celebrating every important win. So you're actually saying deliberately, field out a sort of a not a complete second string team, but sort of a hybrid between the first and second. Don't ever go with your best 15 for a good few months before the World Cup.
That's a great question, but actually what you have to do is you have to manage each player individually, and that's not being done because you get identifying factors will tell you that this athlete's about to break down, and we did that in 2006 and 2007. And whenever the player was looking overtrained and overstressed, then he was held back. And that's what you have to do. And what happens now is you push the player through, and then he gets a major injury and he's out for months. And that's a disaster. So the future, the point is that the Super 15 as today is an impossible competition.
It's gone even bigger now.
It's too long. And I said that before the start of the year. And the players are showing it. And even when they're playing at international level, the standard's low. The guys are...
So how do you then know that the person's sort of stressed out? I'm talking sports specifically.
Well, you monitor their performance.
What do you see?
Well, you monitor their performance firstly, and their performance goes down, and they stop sprinting. That's the key. They stop moving as fast in the major games. But then they start to get illnesses and minor infections and so on. And those are keys. And then they start to complain. We work with the sevens, and they report every day their symptoms. And we will then tell the coach whether he can train that athlete that day or not.
So you call the shots?
Well, no, we just tell him that this is the evidence, this is the information.
But in fact, okay, SMS is 34701. Any questions you want to put through to Tim Noakes or reflect on his life, that's absolutely fine as we put him in the spotlight. So the fact that you can identify that, I mean, do we have the same sort of identifying process outside of sport? You know, when can you tell a person who's working a 9-to-5 job to say, you work, it's time for you to rest?
Well, we know that the human can cope with hard work for 10 to 14 weeks. That's about the limits. And I think we all knew that when we were at school. We would work hard for exams, but it wouldn't be for long periods. So that's it, after 10 to 14 weeks. If you've really been pushing it, working late nights and not taking your weekends and not exercising enough, you'll be finished. And then you've got to be recycled. And the same applies in sport. You have your 10 to 12 week. And that's how we prepared the Springboks for the 2007 World Cup. We made sure that they had enough rest.
I'll ask you whether you're involved in the current Springbok lot, and you'll get your answer. Let's get to the callers. Andrew in George. Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
Yes, Andrew, you're on the air.
Oh, good afternoon. Hello, Doctor.
Hello, Andrew.
Two questions, if I'm allowed. The one is, some while back, you did, in fact, advocate 8 glasses of water a day or something. But subsequently, you changed your mind. Now, I presume 8 glasses of water per day is not, exactly the way to go, if that's what you feel like. Can you...
Let me answer that one quickly. I actually never said that, but it's a very popular piece of advice that is quite frequently given, and the answer is
you didn't say that, but you did correct it.
Yeah. And the answer is that there's nothing wrong with drinking 8 glasses of water because it's not very much. But what they really meant is it's the equivalent of 8 glasses of fluid a day, which is about 2 liters. And most of us drink about 2 liters per day if we're not being vigorously active. And that fluid can come in anything, water, coffee, tea, whatever.
Thank you. I'm 80 years old, a bowler. And beer would substitute well for me.
Perfect. If you got to 80, you're in perfect health. So just keep doing what you've been
doing.
Andrew,
thanks for that call. Nice.
Second question, if I may.
Yes, go for it.
Thank you. I'm a great believer, I have been for a long while, in eating what you feel I suppose the good word is crave for. Like, I do a lot of cooking, of course, but... tonight I'd love beans or spinach, or tomorrow no meat, just pastas. Or is that sort of craving which is a gut feel? That's good or bad?
That's a great question, because humans evolved with foods, and we had to know what foods were good for us, so we were able to judge what foods would be beneficial.
No.
And so you're absolutely right. But unfortunately, it's been distorted by processed foods. So all the foods you said, except for the pasta, are natural foods.
Yeah.
The pasta isn't, and neither is pizza, and they are highly processed foods. And highly processed foods are designed to make you addicted to them, and that's the problem. So we used to eat for the nutrient content. We now eat for the palatability, and that's the problem. Palatable foods are not often very nutritious. We need to eat the foods that are naturally found in our environment.
Well, that's good news. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that call, Andrew in Georgia. Let's go to where I am right now in Cape Town. John on the line. Hi, John.
Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Dr. Noakes mentioned the issue of diet. Now, diet is one issue, but the body can't just depend on diet also, because the body goes through every second of life through trauma, whatever. And that also builds up resistance in the body and outside the body. Because if you look at the environment today, is toxic. Now, I don't know if Dr. Noakes will agree with me, direct pressure points technique. Is that also to assist the body for regulated and build the immune system?
I would never say no, because until quite recently, we didn't use acupuncture points certainly in sports physiotherapy, and I've personally been treated with needles and things, and the results are dramatic. And so 20 years ago, I would have said, but anyone who puts needles into the human body is mad, and they're doing the wrong thing. So pressure points, there is something in it, and I would never discount it. I would just like to make the point that the point about nutrition is, if the nutrition's not right, you can do everything else right. It's not going to help you. And we really have to understand that. And my new understanding is that nutrition is at the base of many more diseases than we think it is. And we really have to start addressing that. And in 20 or 30 years' time, what I'm saying today will be standard knowledge, but it's going to take time for us to get that accepted as standard knowledge.
Okay. John, thanks for that call. John in Cape Town. Sig, I'll come to you in a few minutes' time. Maybe time for maybe one or two more calls. But besides, everybody wants to know about diet. We'll do that in a second, so maybe you've got another potential career. Tim Noakes is my guest. He's the man in the spotlight. I'm Ashraf Garda. We continue talking in a moment. Let's get the news headlines now. It's 3:30. Thanks for that, Natalie. Right, Tim Noakes with us. I'll take the last call I can take now. Then I'll get the SMSs to Sig in Randburg. Hi.
Ashraf,
Yes.
Tim Noakes is one of my heroes too.
You have lots of heroes, yeah.
and yes, but unfortunately, he seems to have got strayed off the course. He's taken sides in a dual controversy, which is really a tripartite issue, and he's ignored the third party of that controversy, which he is the super expert on, which is exercise. It is not an issue between fats and sugars alone. It is an issue of exercise being the most important of all, and he's got that under his thumb, and he mustn't ignore that, and he shouldn't take sides. Our ancestors were as much after honey and sugar as they were after fats.
Okay, let's get a response. Sig, thanks for that call. Right.
Sig, thanks. A lovely chat. Let me tell you that myself, Bruce Fordyce, Oscar Chalupsky, and Sean Micklejohn have all gone on this diet, and we've lost a total of 50 kilograms, and our sporting ability has come shooting back. Now, we are four of the guys who've done more exercise in our lives than most South Africans, and so we learned that exercise isn't good enough. You have to do something else if you're carbohydrate intolerant. So that's the first point. And sugar, in fact, is part of the problem because it's now thought that the obesity rate is, in fact, a hibernation response in humans that occurs in response to the fructose that is present in sugar. See, what you didn't tell people is that we used to find sugar in fructose and honey, in fruit and honey, just before winter when there was no other food. And those people who could eat lots of sugar and get very fat were the ones who survived the winter. And the theory is now that that's the gene that has allowed us to survive as humans, is in fact the one that makes us obese when we expose ourselves to high carbohydrate intakes.
Okay, Sig, hopefully you understood all of that. Lots of SMSs asking about many things, Tim. Let's just get to Dr. Muller, who's calling from Durban. Hi.
Hi, Ashraf. Dr. Shorty Muller. Hi, Prof.
Shorty, thank you for your email. I apologize. I haven't responded to it yet. My condolences to you.
Two quick ones. A few quick ones. Ashraf, I've said this before, you're like a breath of fresh air. What you've done to the radio, when you're driving between hospitals, I'd rather have you than any other station.
Driving between hospitals, you'd rather have me. Okay, great analogy.
Ashraf, as regards Professor Noakes, whether you love him or you don't, people throughout the world will wait for an opportunity to cut his legs. I mean, he's upset so many people over the years. There's nothing we're going to do. He's still going to be around for a long, long time. Prof, I still believe what we discussed before, that our sport generally is still too administrative-orientated as opposed to athlete-orientated. This has to be attended to. I know we got 5 medals and 6 medals, and in 2016 we'll probably get 8. But some of them are hit and miss. We have to be a little bit more structured. And I'm sure you agree with me.
Absolutely. You've been saying it for a long time, and I couldn't agree with you more. And you've been right up there because you've been in administration. And you know what the frustrations are when you see what should be done and what's being done. So thank you for stating that.
Okay, well, Dr. Muller, thanks for that time. Nice call. And I remember that sort of, I'm your entertainment driving between hospitals. I never thought of myself like that, but now I am. And indeed, thanks for that. There's a series of SMSs and tweets I'll pick up. Well, Zofa, I hope I've got that right, saying, please thank Dr. Noakes for his nice stories, but for goodness sake, while entertaining, it remains purely anecdotal. Okay? I'll read through a whole lot more, then you can just pick out some of them to answer in the next couple of minutes, sure. Right? Right, let me just see, where can I get this? Okay, one wants to know, where can I get this diet, right? Rather, I'm diabetic, please repeat your diet, okay? Yeah. Maybe just quickly, if you can answer it.
You just got to cut carbohydrates to less than 25 grams a day if you're diabetic. That's the key.
But that's only if you're diabetic.
But you must please do it with your doctor because you'll need to cut your insulin, and that you mustn't just do it randomly. But Unfortunately, you might not get that advice, but that is my view, that if you're diabetic, you're best off on a low-carbohydrate diet.
Okay, the next one is, ask your guest why South African soccer players are not able to compete with fellow North African counterparts on physical level, and what attributes makes a good coach from Larato. Good coach attributes, I'll answer that. If you keep on winning, you're a good coach anyway. But anyway, answer that one.
Coach puts the athletes first and looks after them and knows how to build self-belief. That's our problem in soccer. Apart from the physical side, which we can correct, there's a lack of self-belief, and we have to do that. We have to get winners competing overseas and winning major competitions. Then they will bring that belief back to the South African Bafana. It's a belief problem. That's what we really have to address.
Okay. Then you spoke about the physical strength of the North African and I think particularly the West Africans as well.
Yeah,
right?
no, they are bigger and they are more muscular and they are faster, but I don't know how you overcome that. It's, in a sense, the same in rugby. The countries like Samoa and Fiji have got these huge guys, and they're a problem for us in the sevens because we have smaller players. You just have to play a different game. That's the key. And I'm not an expert in soccer, but you can only build your physical to a certain extent. Then you have to look at other ways of playing the game to beat these larger guys.
By the way, Gordon Ingerson, the Bafana coach, well, he's been penciled in to be in the spotlight on Tuesday. So just listen out for that Tuesday afternoon from 3 o'clock. I'll probably ask him that. So, I mean, are you then saying then... do you then follow this theory to say, well, if you look at all the sprinters in the world, even the guys from Jamaica effectively have a West African heritage?
Yeah, they do.
For example, and they're very different to the East Africans and the North Africans who
Absolutely.
are that middle distance. I mean,
Yeah.
is that, there can be the oddball who breaks the mold, but in principle, can we make the assumption to say that's the mold?
That's the mold. And you
what
take the
need.
Kenyans. The Kenyans are useless sprinters and they're
Right.
awful soccer players, but they're brilliant marathon
So how
runners.
much of that is because of their genetic and physical makeup?
It is genetic. I mean, your height is determined genetically, and probably your build. I mean, your build like that is decided genetically. I mean, it's all a highly contentious issue because race comes into it and so on, and people don't like to discuss it. But you've got to speak to Usain Bolt, and he says, they've discovered breeding patterns where the British cane cutters, the owners of the farms, actively bred the Jamaicans, the biggest Jamaican male with the biggest Jamaican female. And that's why these guys are just unbelievable. They're in a different league. And Usain Bolt is
and
just...
you said it's not very PC, but racially we can actually debate that.
And I'm not
exactly
saying it, but Usain Bolt said it, and he's allowed to say it.
Okay. Dr. Noakes, why does it seem that the All Blacks are more fit and looking healthier than the Boks from Gio in Cape Town?
Because I think they're better controlled. They don't play as much, and during the off-season, during the Curry Cup season, they don't have to play the Curry Cup. Our players have all just played too much, and they're exhausted now, and that's the problem. So they're centrally contracted in New Zealand so that the national team gets the first priority, and if a player's tired playing for the Super 15s, they might remove him.
As opposed to with us, we contracted to the union.
That's right, and that's the biggest weakness in South Africa.
Joe wants to know, how do I know I am carbohydrate resistant?
Well, you find that you increasingly put on weight as you age, and you get a middle-age spread. And then if you check your blood, you'll find that your insulin and glucose are elevated and your HbA1c is elevated. Or conversely, if you put yourself on a high-fat diet and you lose weight and you don't get hungry and so on, it's probably pretty diagnostic.
Okay, there's another one, Andy, and I'm just going to rush through this very quickly because we've got about 4 minutes or so to go. I've been working day and night every day for the past 3 years. What are the effects of that? And I mean 365 day and night, from Andy in Ruston. Before you answer that question, I'm going to tell you, Andy, where do you have time then to SMS us? I'm just thinking about it. Okay. Your answer to that one?
Yeah, I think I would go and see your doctor and have a full medical evaluation and see what your condition looks like. And if
if his need is not that he needs to earn the income, let's say that he's got a desperate need to, that's why he works 360. If it's not that, I mean, would you advise him even now to say that's ridiculous?
Absolutely, it's ridiculous. I mean, humans need to have time out. They need a month out, time out. I mean, I know that doesn't happen, but that's biologically what we need.
Okay, is a high protein, low diet fat as good as high protein, high fat?
Yeah, most of the diets that are high protein, high fat, low carbohydrate, and that's kind of what people move towards. You can only eat a certain amount of protein or else you become sick, so you have to replace that. The addition has to be protein or else carbohydrates. So generally, if you want to cut the carbohydrates, you in fact eat more fat.
Okay, Peter Reyes from Cape Town saying, a good coach knows when to rest. Okay, just making a point. Please ask Dr. Noakes to tell us what this new diet is. Okay, I think to a degree you've done that already from Eddie. If you want to email me, by the way, Eddie, I'll just pass it on to Dr. Noakes anytime. Ashraf@safm.coza. Tim talks about, are you happy with this one? Homocysteines, right? And CHD disputes abound?
Absolutely. Homocysteine is related to heart disease.
Okay.
Homocysteine is related to heart disease, and it's related to vitamin deficiencies in the diet. And interestingly, a more protein-based diet with animal fats and animal proteins is more likely to give you the vitamins you need to bring your homocysteine down.
Okay, Andrew's saying, hi, Prof. Firstly, how do we know if we are carb intolerant? Secondly, high fat intake related to high fat intake related to cholesterol? Question mark. What fats do you recommend?
Okay,
Andrew, yeah.
There are about 10 blood factors that are linked to heart disease, and if you go on a high fat diet, you improve all 10 of them, and that's the point that's forgotten. The only one that might not change is your total cholesterol may in fact go up on the high fat diet, but that is fallacious because you need to look and work out what has changed. The real killer in cholesterol is called LDL, small particles, and those don't want many of them. You want big fat LDL particles, and if you go on a high fat diet, you increase the number of these large LDL particles.
Lastly, if rugby had the funds, would it not be ideal to manage 33 players the way the 2007 team was? Comes from Dai on the way to Lesotho, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But contract them centrally, pay them from SA Rugby, and then control how much they play in the Super 15 and in the Currie Cup. And then South Africa will be the dominant rugby team in the world.
All right, we've got a minute to go. We're not going to talk about sports science. Just some things. The fact that you're into sports science and can advise, does that take the fun out of your enjoyment of sport for you?
No, not really. I mean, I think that I love watching sport and trying to analyze what's going on, and certainly taking credit or taking enjoyment when things work out properly. I mean, there's nothing better than to help a team and see them do well.
You're coming out with a new book. What's it going to be called?
It's called Original Eating, and that's kind of like what we used to eat and why the new diets are not appropriate.
When is that going to be out?
Probably the end of next year. It's got a long way to go.
Another year to go. Yeah. Right, quick one. A book you'd recommend us to read right now?
Gary Taubes' Good Calories, Bad Calories. If you want to understand the whole nutrition debate, that's the one. Good calories,
calories.
Bad calories.
Okay, got it. Good calories, bad calories.
That is, to me, the most important book that's been written in medicine in the last 50 years. It's an
Good Calories, Bad Calories.
By Gary Taubes.
Last, I was going to ask you so many other things, but people want to talk about one thing, so we haven't had the time about your personal life. I mean, give us a quote that you think we can take home with.
Yeah, I brought my favorite quote along, and it comes from Chariots of Fire.
Okay.
Let each of you discover where your true chance of greatness lies. Seize this chance, rejoice in it, and let no power or persuasion deter you in your task.
Okay. You certainly have done that, right?
I hope so.
Lastly, what is your unfinished business?
I've got to sort out the nutrition, because that's the most important determinant of our nation's health. And until we improve our health, our nutrition, particularly of our youngsters and particularly the poorer people, we cannot build this nation.
Okay, biggest regret?
Biggest regret was that I didn't know how important the mind is in controlling everything. If I'd known that, I would have been better in sport.
That's why they got Dr. Hubbels or someone like that. Anyway, thanks so much for your time, Tim Noakes. Appreciate it. It's been great talking to you, indeed.
Thanks, Ashraf.
Anybody wants to comment further, just email me. I'll pass on the information to Dr. Noakes. ashraf@safm.co.za. Time now for Radio Vuka. 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 Time now.